design, that is, you would receive trees and you would receive training for your faculty in this environmental curriculum. Um, Let me segue real quickly to the actual process in terms of the workshops, the actual training workshops for the curriculum. The principal would opt to have his faculty trained or her faculty trained, and the training would require a 6-hour session. Uh, Most of the time, we would do this in a two-part session, where the first part would happen during a school day, usually an in-service day for the teachers. It might happen 1 month, and a month later, when the teachers had a second in-service day, we would train again, or sometimes we would have the session on a Saturday where we would train for 6 hours. The program, the Project Learning Tree program in Louisiana, was sponsored by the Louisiana Department of Agriculture and Forestry in its Office of Forestry. And there was a lead forester for the state. He was called an education specialist that would promote the program and make sure that it was implemented statewide in schools. And they really liked the opportunity to partner with organizations like Baton Rouge Green, because it really opened up a different way for them to reach principals and teachers in school systems. Now, the Project Learning Tree curriculum was sanctioned statewide by the State Department of Education, so that when you approached a school system or a principal, you could say that, it's been approved for your school system, which helped us to really get our foot in the door. And here in East Baton Rouge Parish, we actually went before the school board itself and presented our program and asked them for additional approval, so that as we would work with principals, they could see that their local school system supported it. What I found over the years in terms of principals and teachers and their relationships with each other is that the principals would ask the teachers to really use this curriculum in a meaningful way. It was a hands-on curriculum that you could use for any subject area, so it was multidisciplinary, and it was correlated to our state benchmarks and education standards. And I think what's really wonderful about the curriculum, as you look at the different activities, there's a list of activities that relates to each subject area that makes it easy for a teacher to choose, a particular topic that they need to teach, and it provided all of the essential information a teacher would need for their teacher work plans that was required by supervisors, teacher supervisors on the local level. So what I found would happen is we would go in, train teachers, and it was the principals, I think, that would really encourage their teachers to use it, and they would say, we want to see it in your lesson planning, and we want to see that you're making use of our grounds to educate, and that's what this curriculum was so good at, in that it used the outdoors to do that. So that was the mechanism for which we introduced the curriculum and were able to reach local teachers. The curriculum itself is very well organized. It's actually in 2 sections. There's a curriculum guide for K through 8th grade teachers that's very easy for teachers to use, and this was certainly backed up by many teachers over the years that would subsequently say, I've really enjoyed it. It works well for me. It's a good curriculum for my students. And then the high school portion of the curriculum was set up in a set of different modules that were more detailed for the way that high school classes are structured, and it was more appropriate for environmental science classes or biological science classes, where the curriculum for K through 8 was really for all subject areas. But I found it to be a very, very worthwhile program for teachers, very useful, very user-friendly. I think it has a broad application across the country. If you're in a community that's not using it yet, I encourage you to find out who is your local representative and to see how it might work with your programming. Jared, I don't know if I've forgotten anything that you might want me to stress more. Um, what do you think?
Can you talk more about how you got the state approval with the education curriculum?
Sure.
Was that a big process?
Yeah, well, that was actually, that part of it, once the State Department of Agriculture and Forestry decided that they wanted to promote the program, they actually contacted the State Department of Education and got the approval at that level. And then subsequent, so that they could really introduce this program to any school district statewide. So that made it so easy, you know, for an organization like Baton Rouge Green, or any other for that matter, greening organization, to be able to tap into it as a resource.
And did you have a certain strategy for gaining deeper buy-in from the principals and teachers? I know you said that they were on board and felt like the principals were key, but did you have a strategy for that?
Well, I think word of mouth was the strategy. You know, I can remember some key principals along the way that just really saw it as a useful tool for their teachers. And each year we would make the program available for 10 schools, and we would ask them, you know, prior participants to write letters of support for it. And as I would go in and talk with principals, I would mention the principals we worked with, and a lot of times that new principal would call one that they knew and talk about it. And so it was a very, I guess, hands-on, personal way of doing it. And each year we would go before the school board after the year's work and give a presentation on the impact of the program. And these would be televised and, you know, broadcast into the different schools in the parish, so that, you know, teachers and principals became very aware of the work we were doing with schools, and saw it as a way to really help, you know, advance training for their teachers and to improve trees and tree populations on their campus, and to get the students involved in it in terms of tree planting. So I think that would be the way that we were able to get the word out.
Did you find that teachers had a certain subset of concerns that you were always making sure that you had head off immediately? You know, I imagine they were in the mindset of, all right, this is great today, but when I take it back to the classroom, here are some things that might derail it, or here are some things that you didn't address. Can you address those things? Was there, you know, a certain subset of concerns that they consistently had?
I didn't observe that. I think what I did observe was that how much they used it probably depended on that principal. I can remember, because I think the curriculum itself, once you get to look at it, if you haven't had a chance to do that, it's very easy to use, and I think it's very meaningful in terms of teaching.
And how long were the lesson plans that they went back and taught? Were they one day, whole week?
They varied depending on which ones they were. I mean, they have some, and what you'll see in the curriculum is it actually tells you that, you know, how long the lesson takes to teach, what materials it requires for you to use to teach it. It's all very clearly stated in each one of the lessons. So it really, the way that it's organized, the teachers can really get to that information really fast and make a determination if it's, you know, the lesson that would be most appropriate for that skill they're trying to teach.
So I'm hearing a couple key things. One is, if you're a local ACT member and you want to do a project like this, one is get the principal on board. That's a very key partnership. Another is use Project Learning Tree curriculum, and then also work on tying it to the state education standards.
That's right, and I think the other thing is really good communication with the school system itself through the school board, because ultimately, even though it was adopted by the state, I think they had to see that it was a program that was beneficial to their principals and teachers, and I think, you know, making a planned effort to visit the school board each year to give them a report, which was usually a PowerPoint with lots of pictures, lots of bullet points that would hit the key points, you know, how many schools we worked with, who were they, how many trees did we plant, how many teachers did we train. I think that's really important too, that they can see that the program is on the ground and working, and it's meaningful and it's making a difference
Right.
In the local communities. I think that's really important too.
I think there's probably a dual purpose there too, in that it integrates the organization into the political framework of the city as well. Then, and
Yeah,
I think that can only be good from this perspective.
I think so too.
Was there ever a scenario or desire from the teachers where you went back to the classroom and co-taught with them?
Well, it allowed us to have more visibility. That is Baton Rouge Green, have more visibility in the teacher community. And they would often call me back and ask if someone, from Baton Rouge Green could come and speak to their class. In subsequent years, they might want a tree for a special tree planting at the school, or they might want to reconnect with the forestry department to see if there's any updates or improvements to the curriculum. So communication like that, would tend to go on for quite a while.
Okay. I want to touch on the funding a little bit more too. You said that banks, and it sounds like some other local businesses were the funders. How did you target them?
Well, the banks in the area, because our public schools had a large minority population, the banks liked supporting education programs in the local schools, and there are credits that banks get for funding those kinds of projects. And please forgive me, I cannot remember the name of the credits today, but that was a strong appeal, I think, to the local banks. And I remember early on, John Bateman was the president of Bank One at the time, and John really had a passion for trees and wanting to see the youth in the community get a better understanding about them and be a part of tree planting and learning about trees. So he had that ethic to begin with. And so he, for years, personally helped us get that funding from Bank One. And it was a long-term relationship that we established with him and his community outreach employees. And we would invite him to come to the plantings, and we'd invite members of the bank staff to come, and they would come. They would come out and be a part of this. And every year, again, we would go back to Bank One and give a presentation and let them know what we were able to achieve with the funding, and again, highlight the impact in terms of teachers, students, trees, and the difference that their funding made in the greater Baton Rouge community.
So you were able to integrate a corporate volunteerism aspect as well.
That's right. And I would make a beautiful booklet each year that I would bring, and it would dedicate a couple of pages to each school, and it would show the teachers involved in the training and the students involved in the plantings and the employees involved, and we would give them each a T-shirt and just trying to make them feel as special as we could. And I had a coordinator at each bank that would help me, target volunteers from the bank, and they were generous enough to let them off from work to come and be a part of the program. So it involved them a lot in it.
And what were the bank's funding? Was it just general sponsorship? Was it staff time? Were there certain materials that they had to pay for? And can you tell us about how much the program cost?
Yeah, they would fund at from $10,000 to $15,000 a year, and I would develop a budget each year, and that would include funding, half the funding for the trees, for some of our staff time to be able to do the program. It would fund partial payment of the design for the teacher training, and then we would require that the school give the other matching half in terms of funds.
Okay, great. Well, let's open it up and see if there are other questions out there. Julie, can you open the lines, please?
Yes, sir, I sure will. We will now begin the question and answer session. If you would like to ask a question, please press *1. Please unmute your phone and record your first and last name when prompted. And to withdraw the question, you may press star 2. Once again, to ask a question, please press star 1. One moment, please.
And participants can ask a question by dialing star 1 like Julie mentioned, or you can type in your question online if you're feeling shy or if you're just more inclined to type the question, and I'll come on and read it for you. And I will also mention that we'll have a question period at the end as well, where you can ask questions of either presenter. So if it takes you a minute or two to formulate your questions, there's no problem on that as well. All right. Julie, do you have any questions?
No, sir. At this time, there are no audio questions.
Okay. Well, let's move on then. Thank you very much, Peggy, and we might come back to you towards the end.
You're welcome.
All right. So let me introduce Nancy Wolf to you now. Nancy is an independent consultant, now facilitating a number of urban forestry-related projects in New York City. She is the facilitator and organizer of the New York City Arbor Day Dawnbound High School Nursery Project and is co-facilitator of Green Horizons and Green Futures, both environmental career days held in October each year. Nancy recently wrote and co-edited Make Every Day an Arbor Day, Be One in a Million, which is the official curriculum guide for students and others involved in the New York City Million Trees Initiative. Nancy has been active in the environmental education field for over 30 years and was previously the executive director of the Environmental Action Coalition, an ACT founding member, and executive director of the New York State Urban and Community Forestry Council. She is on the board of the Magnolia Tree Earth Center, which is a present ACT member. She is a graduate of Hollins College in Roanoke and Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. She received her professional teacher training at the College of William and Mary, and we turn it over to Nancy.
Thanks very much, Jared, and I'm really pleased to be part of this. And Peggy, thank you so much, because good to hear about your experience, and I would just like to echo the PLT training. PLT, I believe, is active in every state, and the state education departments have certified it, I think, all along, and it is a very, very good program. So if you haven't done the PLT investigation, it would be good to do so. John Brown High School is a very special high school in many ways in New York City, and I always love talking about it because people can hardly believe that New York City would have an agriculture and forestry high school, but we do. It's part of, it's a division of a regular high school, and it's in the Flushing, Queens area of New York City, which is the eastern border of the city as it goes toward Long Island. John Brown has long done agriculture and forestry, and it has a farm. They call it a farm. It's about 10 acres or 15 acres, and they have everything that you can imagine on a farm, including small animals and even a llama and all kinds of exciting things. They did not have a nursery, and they did not have a strong forestry program until we decided, several of us decided to see if it would be possible to do a nursery, and this really came from the National Tree Trust. Many of you probably remember the Tree Trust, and they had millions, literally millions of seedlings that they were trying to give out. In cities, it was very difficult to work with that program because the seedlings were too small, and they certainly, there just was hardly any way you could use them. So someone came up with the idea of starting volunteer nurseries, grow-out stations, grow-out nurseries, and we thought it would be ideal for Bound to be the site of such a nursery. They agreed, the Board of Ed agreed, Tree Trust agreed, and I was working for the nonprofit at the time, Environmental Action Coalition, which actually started the ball rolling, but very quickly the New York State Urban and Community Forestry Council took it over as the sponsor. So this is a three-way partnership, the school and the funding source and an environmental organization or some other nonprofit that does the staffing and the financial work. The original funder, of course, was the Tree Trust, and we were very honored to be, and I think we're the first high school that did a grow-out nursery. We may indeed be one of the few or maybe the only high school component of that idea, and I can't begin to tell you how well it really works, because you do have if you're with a high school that has a good program on plant science, or if they just have a strong biology and other science program, and if there is, of course, land, doesn't have to be much. You just saw the picture of the nursery. It doesn't take up a huge amount of space. Then you can do it. And the good part about it is that you've got trained teachers there already who are teaching subjects that tie in with the nursery. You have students who are taking those courses, or in Bound's case, they have elected to pursue a plant science curriculum in a very special way. So that kind of solves the problem of volunteers that I know was hard for some of the other volunteer-based grow-out nurseries. They had a big start, but sometimes they had trouble keeping up with numbers of volunteers that they needed. We, of course, have in-site volunteers, whether they want to be volunteers or not. But, of course, I've been with the students many times as they have done all the different tasks that they do for the nursery, and they are very enthusiastic. The nursery, of course, receives seedlings each year, and we are able to get them very inexpensively from the New York State Nursery, and by special permission, the New Jersey State Nursery. They wouldn't normally let another state buy from their nursery, but because we are down here in their zone, they have many more trees that we can use than the New York State Nursery, which is in Saratoga, which is in the northern part of the state. So those are our sources, and sometimes, of course, we get free trees from commercial nurseries who, of course, at the end of the season are left with trees, and they're always looking to donate them. So that's our third source. The money originally came from the Tree Trust, and if you see the manual, it gives very explicitly how many different things the Tree Trust was able to fund for us as we built the program. The Bound had to choose the site. The original site was too far away from a good water source, so it was moved down near one of the buildings where it can be watered by hoses, so that makes everything much easier. Then they also provided trees for free. They gave us money to buy special soil, which is done at a commercial nursery, and it's particularly for trees that are growing in containers. That has been, I think, a big, big plus. And the seedlings are potted up by the students when they come every spring and into 3-gallon containers. After about 2 to 3 years, or no, after about 1 year, I suppose, they are upgraded to 5-gallon containers where they grow until they are distributed. And all the while, of course, this is part of the curriculum that the students are pursuing, which it makes it all very holistic. After about 2 to 3 years, at least 1/3 of the nursery of 1,000 trees is ready for distribution, and that is where the next step happens. And so, obviously, if you don't have any place that you want to plant trees, it's senseless to do a nursery. But we had a great need to do Arbor Day trees in New York. We have long been involved, we meaning a coalition of not-for-profit and green people, long been involved with teaching teachers about Arbor Day and offering trees. But where to get the trees was always a little bit of a problem. The nursery very neatly solved that problem for us. And so we have over 300 trees each year ready to give out. And then the next key factor was how you get them to all the schools. New York is huge, as you know. The idea of teachers or principals or custodians coming to the nursery to pick up trees, that's just not viable in New York City. So the Parks Department has become the distributor of the trees, and that is absolutely critical. So this past spring, we sent over 300 trees out to over 100 schools. And so far, we have sent over 1,500 trees from the nursery to schools and parks and playgrounds around the city. Even though the National Tree Trust is no longer the co-sponsor, we follow their model, which was very, very critical from the beginning. They don't want trees to be given out to people for their own private backyards. So all those trees had to be put in public spaces. And we are still following that model, and I think we will probably follow it from now on. It's just, it's a good model, and there's plenty of demand from the Parks Department, from community gardens, from playgrounds, and of course from schools. And We have had wonderful relationship with the schools that have begun to receive trees. We have a few regulars who are using this program to really create a small arboretum of their own at the school. And then each year we've got new schools that come in to the program and start the process. The Department of Education of the City of New York has become a partner as well. The Science Division is very much in favor of this program, and they are key to our getting the word out to the teachers. There's a tremendous electronic network going, and probably all of you have that same thing. Email has just made everything amazingly different. Between their network and the network of the nonprofit community and the governmental networks of other agencies, it's just, it goes citywide. These trees are available. This past spring, we were put into the Science Division's science newsletter, and that prompted a lot of response. And that, of course, hits the very teachers that are the most interested in doing it. What teacher in the school is most likely to want to do a tree and care for it and be involved with the students? And that's going to be the science teacher, no matter what level it is. Other teachers have done it as well, and it's a wonderful, cooperative venture among many curriculum strands, but the science teacher is, of course, the one most likely to want to do it. The trees are very easy to plant. They are 5-gallon containerized trees. They are big enough to withstand transplanting and being established, but they are not so big that the kids can't lift them. So they can be very, very involved, even if they're young children. I happened to plant 2 of the trees for the first time this spring in a community garden because these were trees that couldn't be used, as it turned out, by the people that ordered them. And I was extremely pleased to see how well grown they were. And I think the soil is a key factor because the root system was extensive, planted a redbud and a serviceberry. And they settled in, and they're still alive today. So that is how this program works. And when the New York State Council took it over, of course, funding for the various components came for many years from the council's own budget through its partnership with the Forest Service. That enabled us to help the kids go on very special field trips. They went out to the nursery in New Jersey. They went up to the New York State Nursery on a 2-night overnight where they also visited state forests and state parks. They have been out to Farmingdale on a field trip. And Farmingdale is a State University of New York college that specializes in horticulture and forestry. And the connection with Bartlett really is not as a summer program, which was in the first paragraph that we saw there back at the beginning of the presentation. It's actually that Bartlett sponsors a college scholarship for one student from Bound each year, and that would be a scholarship to go to Farmingdale. And that the Bartlett Tree Expert Company has long been a major sponsor and partner of this program. The New York State Council has ceased being the that I guess really that we ought to talk about that for a moment, because the stable funding, of course, is key to any of these things that we do. When the New York State Council decided that they were no longer able to be the third partner for Bound, that was a real blip. And the steering committee that had long been involved with Bound, the local steering committee, had to make a decision. Is Bound going to continue or is it not? Is the nursery going to continue as we have put it in place or not? Are we going to step up to the plate and raise the funds to make it happen? And I'm happy that the steering committee decided, yes, we will go on. We will definitely find the funding. We may not be able to do all the wonderful field trips right now, but we are definitely going to find the base funding. The Bartlett Company is a partner in that base funding. Trees New York is a partner, and we are doing grant writing. I think we're probably going to get a grant from the New York State Urban Forestry Fund as a special separate grant for that. But that is a time when each great new project has to really think it through. You know, is it important enough to stay, and how can you make it stay, and is there any reason why we wouldn't be able to do it? So fortunately, at the moment, we are doing fine, and I'll just mention Green Horizons just very briefly. That is a career day we have for middle school kids every October. Huge collaborative effort. The Bartlett Company is also involved with that as a sponsor, and so is Con Edison, our utility. But Bound's participation puts the kids in sync with the younger kids as a result of Green Horizons. We have Bound high school kids coming to Green Horizons to do a station on floriculture and to present their exhibit. And you know, that's how that ties into that other activity that I'm involved in. So I think that's where it all is, and I'd be happy to answer questions.
Great, thanks, Nancy. Let me start in first while people are formulating their questions. I spent some time as a public school teacher in Chicago, and one of the things that was toughest for me was getting buy-in from students, and I wasn't doing anything as holistic or adventurous as this. Was that something tricky for you all? How did you deal with that?
Well, the students, of course, let's face it, they have to be at the nursery or else they're not passing their course. So it is a volunteer, but it's kind of a captured volunteer. But I have been out there many times with them, and they are very, very affable, very interested, seemingly very gung-ho. We do a career day for them as well when they're juniors, and I was told by one of them that he could tell that the kids really enjoyed what we were doing, the nursery part and the other things we were presenting. And I asked, of course, how do you know? He said, because they're right there. They're standing right at the station. They're asking questions, and they're not wandering off, and they don't look bored. So I suppose if you're hearing it from one of them, you know, that's as good as it gets. I don't think that the teachers would have continued this program if they did not think it was working. And it has been going now for about, in the present iteration, it's been going for over 10 years. So I think we would have heard from the Bound teachers, especially the assistant principal that's in charge of the Aggie program. He's a very serious professional. If he didn't see value there, we wouldn't be there.
How do you recruit new students to the program?
Well, they, of course, have students. The students that come to that high school choose to go into the Aggie program, which I think it's so hysterical that New York City has a program called the Aggie program, and they have the largest FFA chapter in New York State, by the way, which I just find to be wonderful. They choose to go in, and then after 2 years, after sophomore year, they choose either animal science or plant science. So the young people that are in the program that we work with have made two choices. They've gone to John Bound. They've made three in a way, because anybody can go there. They've made a choice to go to Bound. They've made a choice to go into the Aggie program, and they've made a choice to be in plant science. So they are there of their own volition.
So if they end up on the plant science track, they end up out at the nursery?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And I saw you had in the resource manual that you provided, which hopefully everyone on the call has seen or at least downloaded. I'll link to it again on our website after this, but I did send out an email to everyone with a link to the resource, which is fantastic, and I guess I'll stop and say thank you to Nancy for providing it to everyone. It's really detailed. It talks about time that it took them to start up, and the various hurdles that they overcame, and what the plant list was, and how much this or that costed. So I definitely encourage everyone to go out and look at that. But I saw that there were 12 classes listed that were tied to this nursery.
Right.
Was I reading that right?
Yes.
That's fantastic.
Well, remember, this is a serious plant science program. I do believe in a more regular high school, there would, you were going to you'd get the biggest buy-in from the environmental science and the biology people. And you might not have as big a nursery. I mean, so part of the learning curve, as the manual shows, is we started out with 3,000 seedlings, and that was not a good idea. That was too many, and with the area where it was too far away from a reliable water source. So we learned there, and the assistant principal, who's in charge now, made some very wise decisions, and he moved it back close to a water source, and he said 1,000 is all we can adequately care for at this time, and that's what we have at the moment. So you've got to make it work for you. And then, of course, suppose you have 1,000 trees and you have 350 or 400 every year that you could give out. Maybe there's not enough demand in someone else's city for that. So, you have to figure it out. It has to go so it all works together.
I imagine you know the survival rate of the trees in the nursery?
Oh, the survival rate of the trees in the nursery is excellent. We have lost very few of the trees in the nursery. Where we are not doing as good a job, because it's so hard to get this information from teachers, is, how are the trees surviving when they get out to the schools?
Right.
I would give anything if I had really great hard data every year. We send out, messages to them every single year. Please tell us how they're doing. Are they dead? Are they alive? Do you know why they died? And because teachers are really super busy, I think, and we do not have the staff capacity to try to call everybody. We're working on it. It's getting a little better, but I think if someone pointed to a weakness in our program, it would be that we don't know enough about the trees that are sent out.
Okay. And how long does it take to get the program up and running from idea to nursery operational?
I think it took about 2 school years to have that first nursery up and running, which was okay. It's just that we made, one big mistake. We decided to do 3,000, and the spot for it is too far away from a reliable water source. So the first year it went fine, but the second summer there was a drought, and this is an all-year-round school. I mean, there are custodians there all the time, and they swore that they had turned the watering system on, and many trees died, and our conclusion was probably there just was not a lot of water pressure. And we had those little revolving irrigation things spritzing around, and the trees just simply did not get enough good watering. So that was our big mistake. So the real nursery that was established with, in the right way, probably was in good shape about 4 years in. But you don't have to make that mistake.
That's the benefit of the Alliance for Community Trees, right?
Right.
The networking potential.
Absolutely.
Well, let's turn to questions from participants. Julie, can you open the lines, please?
Yes, sir. And once again, if you would like to ask an audio question, please press *1, and remember to record your first and last name. One moment, please.
All right. Again, you can type your question in as well, and we'll start with questions there. First is, have you tracked the number of students who have moved into the green industry professions/jobs after graduating?
The school is doing some of that tracking, and we are really seeking to pin that down. Most of the kids in the plant science program are going to go into some part of the green industry, and that's one of the career day things that we emphasize. Most of them, it's hard to, you would have to track them for 4 years to find out if they really did end up as an arborist, for example, or a landscape architect or whatever, because what the school knows about them is that almost every one of them is going into some kind of college or training program that relates directly to plant science. The Bartlett Company is very interested in this program because they take kids right out of high school, and they are most anxious to get New York City kids into their training arborist program. They do on the job training, and they need a lot more people in their New York City related offices, and they would like very much to have more kids from the city go that route. So there are some openings that the kids go into right out of high school. But most of them are going to colleges such as Cornell and the State University at Syracuse, which is environmental science and forestry. They go to Penn State. They go to Farmingdale and other, programs that are very definitely plant science related. That's where we know they are now, and we need to work with the school to try to attract any who then go from those colleges into the careers that we have explained to them at the Career Day.
And I'll make a general note to everyone on the call that green jobs is something that, at least on the federal level, is a very hot issue, and I'm sure we will be working on that in the coming Congress. And we'll wait until 2009. But if you have an anecdote about green jobs, particularly if they relate to trees, please email me, because we use those stories when we go to the Hill. We use programs to craft better legislation, and I'll definitely follow up with you, Nancy, as well on this from that perspective later on.
Yep.
All right. Another question is, who cares for the trees in the nursery during the summer when the school is not in session?
Well, fortunately, this is an all-year-round school, and students are actually there. The younger students have to actually go for part of the summer right there on campus or on the farm. That's what they call it, so that's what I'm now calling it, the farm. And they are there. And the older students, the juniors and seniors, they go upstate, mostly to farms that they are working with, and sometimes we're encouraging them to do more with the state forests and the state parks. So those kids are involved almost all year round. Plus, of course, there are custodians at the school all year long, and since it's now easy to water the nursery, they water when the students are not there.
Okay. Are the students who are growing the trees engaged in community greening efforts with the trees they grow, example, neighborhood plantings, etc.? Is there a civic component of the curriculum?
It's not, well, New York City has this kind of general notion that kids should be involved with work in the community. I don't think Bound has targeted that as specifically as it might. What's happening now, though, is the Million Trees Initiative is now, going like wild, and they're involving just about everybody under the sun in doing it. The kids I know have worked with the Parks Department Natural Resources Group to help plant seedlings, and here you can really use small seedlings in the natural parks. For example, they've been in the Inwood Park with the Natural Resources Group to do that type of planting, and that is, I think that's the specific that I know they have done. And the Million Trees thing, the school system is, very tied into it. So one of the things I think that they need to be encouraged to do is be involved in the fall and spring planting days. And I don't know, there's one coming up, the fall planting day is coming up, citywide planting day. I don't know if the Bound kids are involved in that or not, because I haven't had a chance to ask the principal, the assistant principal that I work with. But they're going to have, if they haven't done it before, the opportunities for doing this have expanded exponentially because of this emphasis on planting 1 million trees. And just one other thing which I forgot to say about the Arbor Day trees this year, all of them are going on the Million Trees website. In other words, that's our contribution to the Million Trees so far.
Okay. Julie, do you have any questions?
Sure. At this moment, there are no audio questions.
Okay. Well, I will continue with the online questions. There's a follow-up to the survival rates. How about getting the students to do a project each year to make calls to get responses for survival rates?
Well, I think that's a very, very good idea, and it would put those students, those high school students, together with the younger students in a very special way. And I think probably an email. The kids are all on the email all the time. I think the easiest, best way to be doing that would be for us to try to set up email for all the teachers that have received trees, and see if there couldn't be a direct response. The students from Bound could email the teachers, and through them, hopefully, the kids from the class could reply, because that's now now that with just about every classroom having internet capability and so on, that would be, I think, the easiest way, instead of the phone, which is very difficult, trying to phone in to somebody with a school situation. But the emailing thing, I think that's a great suggestion for a real email network.
Okay. Have you approached utility companies for funding to raise trees that are appropriate for growing under primary electric lines?
We have very few electric lines that are above ground, I am so happy to say. Almost all of the utility lines in New York are underground, so we have not had to focus on wire-friendly trees, except in a very, very few areas in the eastern part of Queens. They have above-ground utility lines. The city and Con Ed and the relationship there is long-standing, of course. And I think with the Million Trees initiative in particular, the city is planting every single space that the census has shown where to plant trees, and they are going to plant every single space, they say. And they are growing their own trees. They're contracting with nurseries to bring trees to their own grow-out space, actually, where they are growing them, higher and bigger and better to replant on the streets. So I don't think Con Ed and the city have a special relationship on wire-friendly trees, but we're very aware of how important it is to plant small trees under those wires that we do have. I think New York City is not a hotbed of this like some other places are, because we have very few streets that have have wires over them. Thank goodness.
Great. And I forgot to mention that certainly if you have a question for Peggy or Nancy, this would be the time to ask it. And we do have a question going back to Peggy. Has the State Forestry Department had a continuing role in the program, and do you receive any grant money through them to support the program?
Yes, they have. They still disseminate the program through the Department of Agriculture and Forestry. And here in Louisiana, you can receive a grant through the Urban and Community Forestry Grant Council for funding for the programming each year. Although lately, with the changing of the focus of that grant program, they're accepting grants that are more of a regional outreach. So, but I think you could still receive grants that way, and certainly in other states, I think you could receive them that way for the program.
Okay. Julie, any questions for the audio?
No, sir. At this time, there are no audio questions.
Okay. I had a couple other questions for Nancy. One of the things that strikes me about the John Bound program is that it's massive. It seems like it's the kind of thing that could overtake an organization's mission. Did you have any of that?
Well, you mean you couldn't do anything else because this one is the thing that was taking it over?
Yeah.
No. Frankly, no. And actually, of course, I'm just trying to think of you, since I am the one that has staffed this, either as executive director of the New York State Council or now as a private consultant. I'm the staffer. And I'm trying to decide right now how many hours, I've authentically spent on this program this year. And that will include, of course, staffing Green Futures, which is what we call the high school career day thing we do. So it's probably 100 hours, I'm guessing, which is not overwhelming. I mean, once it's up and of course, getting it to the point where it could easily go forward, that took a lot more time. But probably about 100, maybe 150 hours of my time to do it all. I think it doesn't happen all the time. There's a getting ready spot that you have to start like mid-February, and then that portion ends with the distribution, which in our case is the fourth Friday in April. Then there is getting ready for Green Futures, which I'm doing right now, which, starts late August and ends when October the 30th happens, which is when Green Futures is this year. And then this consultation with the faculty member that I work with off and on. He has to tell me in November, for example, what's in the nursery now, and that is how we know what to order. And we do the ordering in December and January, and the seedlings come in late March, early April.
Okay.
So it's not overwhelming.
And one final question. As you identify, if you're a local ACT member and you would like to start a program like this, and you're trying to identify a school who would be appropriate, would be a good fit, it seems like faculty and curriculum were key components. But I guess, are there any tips you can offer for sizing that school up to tell whether or not it would be appropriate?
Well, I know that we have tried to identify the so-called green schools in New York City, and my guess is in other cities that's happening. If it isn't happening, it's going to happen. Which are the schools that are most gung-ho over the environment? In some cases, it may be a school that's dedicated to the environment. In others, it may be one where there's a very strong science program, especially biology and so forth. Those are the schools to go to. Those are the ones that will be most interested, and of course that's where the partnership has to start. We are hoping to work with McKinley High School in Buffalo to start a nursery up there, which would be the second model based on Bound in New York State. And why McKinley? Because people there have told us McKinley has a strong horticulture program, and I've talked to the faculty member, and indeed they do, and he's very gung-ho. And that is where it starts. Now, there's going to be a lot of work to do to get it up and going, but they have already got the interest. So building interest in a school that has no interest, that would be hard to do. But I would imagine in every city that ACT is involved with, there's going to be at least one school. There's got to be. And if there isn't, encourage one.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you, Nancy, and thank you to Peggy. Put up on the screen a quick survey. If everyone could go out there, I think there are 4 questions. It should literally take 2 minutes or less. Your answers to those questions really help us to develop these sessions. So please, again, do that, and I'll send an email follow-up to this with that same link. Our next webcast is Marketing and Communications, Part 1. It kicks off a 4-part series that Lori Kaufman from Tree People will be anchoring for us. And it's on October 16th, and I think the time will be at 2 o'clock Eastern. I think we're actually going to change it for this one because of Neighborhoods Month. An event is coming in and pushing a little bit. But otherwise, I hope people can join us for that. I want to thank Peggy and Nancy very much for presenting. This has been a fantastic webcast. I want to thank our sponsors, the Home Depot Foundation and the USDA Forest Service, and all of our participants who joined us today. Thanks, everyone.
Jared, I'd like to thank whoever it was that suggested that the kids from Bound be directly involved with the other kids at the schools. We're going to work on that.
All right.
Thank you for participating in today's conference call. You may disconnect at this time.
Thank you, Nancy.